Welcome to Game Over Juniors, not Montreal. I almost said Montreal, but you know what? It feels a little bit different because the team I guess they weren't wearing red, but red and white primarily won the game. And what a game it was. Absolutely wild first period and a little bit more low key towards the end there, but still a good game for Team Canada. I'm joined today by Mitch Brown and Tony Ferrari, so let's welcome them in right now. How's it going, boys?
Who's going to be the first to go, Tony?
You can go ahead, Mitch. Why not?
I need to pick up a coffee habit, I think. I think that's where I'm leaning after today.
Yeah, and I need to increase my coffee habit. That's already pretty bad as it is. So,
well, I'll tell you what, guys. I think I've got you beat because my youngest woke up last night at 2:30 in the morning, and he never went back to sleep. So I'm running on fumes here. We won't talk about what's in the mug today. All right, so I think it's a pretty wild game. Obviously, we talked a little bit while I was setting the stream up. Mitch was saying like a very typical Canada first game in the World Juniors, a little bit nervous, a little bit reckless, and they were pretty sloppy, especially on the defensive side. Lots of like goal mouth scrambles throughout the game in the offensive zone. That some of them they got their sticks on, some of them they just kind of like whacked, and it didn't really work out. But in this specific tournament, where I think you look at the two groups, and it's very clearly like one group is very hefty and one group is not. No disrespect to Czechia, who I think put up a really good fight in the first period. I think it's important for Canada to get that little bit of worry out in the first game. And the Czechs put them up against it a little bit, and they had to climb out of it. Scored 5 straight goals to end the game. Do you guys see it that way, or is this just a sloppy start?
I think it's just a sloppy start.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I think it's just a yeah, we're gonna do this all night. No, I think it's just a sloppy start by Canada. I think we saw how disjointed they were from the defense to the forwards. They mentioned it on the broadcast, and then as you kept watching it, it never really improved even throughout the rest of the game. They just happened to get that heater of 5-on-3 power plays where Owen Power dominated, and that 5-minute stretch there was kind of really what won them the game. Other than that, I don't think like they obviously won the shot battle and everything in the possession battle, but it wasn't as dominating over a win over a Czechia team that I didn't think was going to be that good. And in all honesty, they weren't outside that first period.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I look at it as a positive is you go into that first game and people are talking about Connor Bedard. How much is he going to play? By the end of that first period, it was clear that his diminished role or like small role was going to grow significantly. So I see that as a bit of a positive that they're actually going to be forced to play their more skilled players here. And they figured that out relatively early. And I liked Dave Cameron's decision to call a timeout when it was 3-1 and just kind of settle things down a little bit. And I was not too keen on the second goal that Garand allowed. I thought that he was really slow getting over to that post. You don't often see goalies get beat low to the post there, but overall, I thought he settled in decently as the game went on as well. Not that the Czechs had that much pressure, but there are like a few things, despite the fact that defensive issues never really cleaned up the whole game long, that were moving things in a positive direction.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think you come away from this game being happy with the committee effort. I tracked data for this game, and every single player except for one either set up or shot a scoring chance in this game at 5-on-5. And you got big contributions, not just from Owen Power on the back end, but Olin Zellweger had 2 or 3 good looks. Caden Gooley set up 2 chances with great passes inside the slot. So, you do have a lot of good little things to take away from. You also had some of the early energy that they created through their physicality and forecheck didn't really cost them until the end of the game with Justin Sordiff. Jake Neighbors, Ridley Gregg, they managed to keep everything in check. And overall, like, I think it's a good game to build off of. It was a very sloppy, inefficient performance. Like, even if you look at their work in the offensive end, there were a lot of pucks just being thrown into the slot with no one really there. Ken Johnson had a couple of them as usual. So that's something that, he's a star player. He's supposed to be the guy who's going to lead this team up front after McTavish, and he needs to be able to connect plays a little bit better than he was. Overall, though, like, I think mostly a positive thing. Mostly.
Just the defense needs to be cleaned up significantly. I was writing notes on the game, and I was literally writing a note that was like the D-zone turnovers. Canada was very lucky that it wasn't costing them. It was like 1-0 at the time, and as I finished writing it, it wasn't a D-zone turnover, but they immediately allowed a goal, and then obviously 2 more right after. The sloppy play on defense, it kind of lends. I know we talked about this on Game Over Montreal. I think when Tony was on, about the choices that they made and who was and wasn't invited to camp based on defensive responsibility, we'll say, or like unpredictability. It seems like they've still got plenty of that in the lineup so far.
This is what happens when you take players who tend to be more defensive specialists. That's always just an inevitability. Caden Gooley had a very strong game with the puck, and he still had like 3 or 4 missed passes, a couple of them unpressured. Donovan Zabrango had a couple of rough ones. Carson Lambos as well. So it's going to be, they need a lot of down low support from the forwards, high activity. They do have a lot of guys who like to bring that, but lots of short support is going to have to be the big thing on the breakout going forward.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my point too, is that like we're obviously going to look at this game and go, Owen Power had a hat trick, the first defenseman to ever do that for Canada. But there were a number of times where he was giving the puck away in the defensive zone, or he got beat outside or inside. He kept getting beat. And it was like, man, those defensive deficiencies throughout the entire defensive core were still there. And as Mitch said, like they're going to need those guys like Mason McTavish and even guys that aren't necessarily known for that, like Kent Johnson, to come down and be that defensive support system for them, because they don't really have the most dynamic defense core back there in terms of being able to move the puck quickly.
And it seems like Canada does this a lot, and I don't want to get too hung up on it in the first game, right? Because it's always like, it's the first game, it's junior hockey, it's always a little bit sloppy. But when you have the ability to just outskill teams and you choose not to, based on the team that you build, it's come back to bite Canada many times in this tournament and others. Hopefully it doesn't this one, because I think we're all, not unbiased observers here on Game Over Juniors, because we're all from the same place here, and I think we all want to see Canada win. But this game didn't lend a lot of confidence to the defensive efficiency of that D-core, despite the fact that they seem to be pushing the idea that some guys that were really highly offensively skilled weren't allowed on the team because they were defensively deficient. Owen Power, let's talk about him a little bit, because like you said, he was not amazing on the defensive end, but in the offensive zone, I thought that he really had some magic going tonight. Not necessarily like incredibly dynamic or anything. He wasn't, like breaking down teams like prime Erik Karlsson or anything. But what I noticed is that when he was out there, Canada maintained control. They were just very long possessions. He was making smart plays with the puck. He was always where he needed to be, and benefited tonight with the first hat trick, as Tony said, for Team Canada defenseman ever in this tournament.
Yeah, I'm sure like Mitch's data kind of lends to this a little bit more, but I think that one stretch in the second period there where he kind of used those 5-on-3 to his advantage, and then you saw the little between the legs shot he had as well on the rush as he kind of drove the middle lane and got a pass to the middle. But it was a lot of guys facilitating for him and him taking advantage. And to his credit, he did a good job of that. But I think I'd love to hear Mitch's take on his game overall too.
Yeah, I kind of have it as the opposite way, where he was the one who was facilitating for everyone else. He got on the end of it on the power play, but at 5-on-5, his activation was crazy in this game. We're talking like forechecking, well-timed weak side pinches, just always being involved in the play, and not to the point where like he's chasing the puck, but to where he's merely an extension of what the forwards are trying to do. And so he's able to play this sort of like free-flowing style hockey that then links everyone else on the ice together. And that's kind of what makes Power so special, right? And he has the passing skill, the deception. He had that great look in the late second period, I think, cross slot after he beat a guy from the point. So when you put all that together, you get a guy who can both facilitate and create. He has dynamic qualities, and he can do lots of great things with the puck and just be a force overall. Defensively, it's a lot more adventurous. He's still, the defense is still very much a projection with him, right? He's big and mobile. You expect him to be able to correct a lot of mistakes through virtue of reach and whatever. but currently there are some, off the rush gap issues. There are some pivoting issues still that linger, but I mean, he's a first overall pick for a reason, and he looked every bit the part of it tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I noticed, like, the thing that I noticed the most was the extending the possessions and what you were mentioning, Mitch, like just pinching at the right times, making the right moves, keeping those ozone possessions going. Speaking of passing skill, one guy that I did notice out there a lot, especially once Team Canada was down, was Cole Perfetti, specifically for his vision. He seemed to be the guy. I don't want to say he necessarily cued the comeback or anything, but he was a huge part of what gave Team Canada success out there tonight.
Go for it, Mitch.
You guys, you're both afraid to talk over each other.
I'm just trying to figure out the timing here on how Tony wants to exchange this. And I'm like, okay, one time he's going first. All right. So I'll just sit back and let him go. But no, so Perfetti is a bit of a hockey genius, right? Like, this is the big thing. He's the type of player who, when most guys speed up, he slows down. Like, he operates within like the creases of the game that don't really tend to exist anymore, because everything is go, 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 be fast, straight line. And he really, really came alive. Like, he had a few passes or whatever that just missed, like, not a huge deal, but he really came alive and just like moving the puck to his teammates at the right time, drawing pressure towards him, delaying. He's so good at coming in the zone, slowing down or cutting across guys, backing the defense up or making them overshoot, and then finding someone behind him. And on top of that, like, this guy has incredible goal scoring instincts. Like, he might not be like a 30 goal guy in the NHL like consistently, but just the way that he's always in space, arriving to it at the perfect time, means that he can finish off plays. And he also uses that, just as he did in this game, to make the extra pass to set up an even better look.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my point, was how smart he is with the puck and how much he's able to kind of direct traffic. And I think it was the second Owen Power goal where they were both up at the point above the circles, and he directs Power to go to his one-timer side just so he can get the puck to him. And then a couple plays later, he's a guy that's kind of facilitating to the outside on the half wall. And then right at the right moment, he gets to the front of the net and tips the puck on net and just barely misses from scoring. So I think that's really what his game is. Like Mitch said, he's not necessarily the guy that goes 100 miles a minute. He's not going to be the guy that drives defenders back with his speed. He's going to be the guy that manipulates the defense with his mind and kind of dictates the way the game is played that way.
So you're saying he's a Jedi?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, checks out.
Would it be unfair to say that Shane Wright didn't stand out in this game?
No, absolutely not. I think that's the right take.
Yeah, I got a number of texts from friends in the industry, and they were like, does Shane Wright look like his feet are heavy? Does Shane Wright look like he's not moving well? And whatever it was, he just wasn't a guy that really stood out among a group of guys that did have a few standouts, like Cole Perfetti, Owen Power, Mason McTavish, who we'll probably get to in a minute. But yeah, it was just kind of a game where he was almost just a guy, which isn't necessarily something you want to see from a guy projected to go as high as he is.
He had a strong night on the forecheck. Like, that's the one thing that I think he did a little bit well. Like, here's a stat: he had 0 controlled entries at 5-on-5 this game, which is insane for a guy who generally gets all of the controlled entries in junior hockey. And it's not like he didn't play a bunch. So, this is with Wright. This is a bit of a continuation of what's going on in Kingston, or at least in the early stages. But I also still think, he's, once he gets the timing down of his teammates, once he understands what they're going to do, he's really going to take off. We'll see, though. It's early. It's been a tough year overall for him, I think. So,
is it possible with Wright that the issue is kind of, he's used to being the most skilled guy, and now that he's got a lot of heavy skill around him, he might not be holding the puck as much?
It's possible, I guess, but I don't think Wright's ever really, like, he's always had a lot of skill. He's always had the dynamic element to his game, but he's never been a guy that relies on that. Like, you look at Kent Johnson, I could see that being an issue for a guy like him, but with Wright, he's always been a guy that kind of makes the right play at the right time, kind of understands what he has to do. And in this game, I don't know if it was just, hey, these are more senior guys that understand what their role is a little bit more and let me kind of fill in for them, or what it was. But yeah, he just didn't really seem, I don't want to say comfortable, but he wasn't really himself in this game.
He defers a lot, even in Kingston, yep, even when he's the top guy. And so I don't think this is too surprising. Like, if we didn't have, his 15-year-old season and the first half of this season in Kingston to work off of, it'd be like, yeah, this is terrifying for a variety of reasons. But since we know that this is generally what his game looks like, he's just a super, he's a super high-end version of what it essentially amounts to a relatively simple skill player. Like, simple skill is not a bad thing. Patrice Bergeron is a simple skill guy in terms of how he plays. He's in the middle of things rather than at the end of things. He's making high skill plays, but he's making them typically at, like mid-range distance instead of making these long cross ice passes or these dynamic rushes based on foot speed and handling skill. So, the cards might be kind of stacked against him to stand out here. But on the other hand, like, you got all this talent. This is the most talent you've played with since Don Mills. Like, you should be creating everything. I mean, this could all be like completely worthless analysis in like 3 days after they go Austria, Germany back to back. So who knows?
Yeah, he'll end up with like 7 points or something like that, and then we'll all, hang our heads and be like, all right, it was one game, we're overanalyzing, but this is what we do. This is what this industry is all about, right? Is we overanalyze and we not necessarily jump to conclusions, but we try to figure out what's going on, and sometimes we get ahead of the curve, and sometimes we bite too hard on something, but we try to be cautious and talk about what we know and what we see. Speaking of that, I was just reading the Twitter timeline as the game was going on every once in a while, and I noticed our friend Justin Bourne from Sportsnet was singing the praises of Kent Johnson and saying that he's watched him like one game and he's already in love. Can you guys speak to what makes him such a special player?
Yeah, honestly, I'll give this one to Mitch because I think his data would probably do a better job than me just blabbering on about him.
Well, he did not have a good game statistically at 5-on-5.
Oh no. Bad eye test, Justin.
Yeah, no, Kent Johnson is just such an electrifying puck handler. Like, he has saying he has creative solutions to a problem is like an insane understatement. This guy has the most creative solutions to any problem. He had one sequence along the boards where he kind of toe dragged the puck a little bit, lost it, and then pulled it back with his foot. And like, it created this like weird kind of change of pace hesitation. So the defender is like, what? And then goes back the other way. And then Kent Johnson's like way gone already. And so it's just the way that you can put him in these tricky situations, and he is going to find a way out of them with the puck, with possession. I think in this game, some of his issues, as I mentioned earlier, were just that he was kind of blindly throwing pucks into areas where he was expecting his teammates to be. Spoiler alert, they were not on a couple of those occasions. But he's dynamic. Like, he's the opposite of how Wright plays. This is a guy who every single possession is going to be something insane.
Speaking of something insane, we've got to talk about Mason McTavish because he was flat out incredible for most of this game, especially in the offensive zone. And he really has basically patented a signature move in one game. Like, I haven't watched him that much in his career, but already I know that he's going to do this like little fake move where he pretends to deke and just lets go with the puck, and it goes in between an opponent's stick and their leg, and then he's got it on the other side. It's how he scored his first goal, and he did it, I think, 3 other times in the first period alone. I mean, talk about creative solutions, but maybe one that he might not want to try too often in this tournament before people figure it out.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Mason McTavish is for a couple of years at least, where everyone was like, man, like, this kid's got the power elements of his game. He's got the size, he's got the shot, he's got some skill. He just needs to get better on his feet. No, since his 16-year-old season in Peterborough, he's really improved his skating. And I think that's the biggest thing. He's working off his edges so much more. And he's able to do those moves like that, where he's able to kind of put the puck into space, get to it quickly, and then put his shoulder down, put his arm out, and kind of protect the puck really well, and then just pull it to the inside and put it in the top corner on the opposite side. Like, it's just ridiculous, some of the stuff he does, but he's really a man amongst boys at this tournament. It's pretty fun to watch because you're like, man, like, this is a guy that played at the NHL level and looked fairly capable. Like, he wasn't dominating by any means at the NHL level, but he looked like a pretty decent player there. So seeing him at the World Juniors now, seeing him in his brief time in Peterborough where he's torn it up pretty well, it's not completely shocking to see him doing this at the World Juniors.
This first game back, he has a hat trick, 10 shots on goal, just like all, some of them were vintage Mason McTavish, like just finding space and setting up. And then others were this version of Mason McTavish, the guy who wants to be puck dominant and wants to create something. And part of what makes McTavish really special as a handler, like just as he does on that goal, is the first thing is body positioning, right? How he fights to get his lower half in front of the attacker's lower half or the defender's lower half. And he's such a strong dude that like sometimes he just like reaches out and puts his hand in front of the guy and then is like, okay, you're in front of me, but now you're on my back. Just like pulls him like straight back behind him. And then the handling. So the backhand thing that he did, a really clever little move, kind of an underutilized thing generally. But the basic idea is you're just kind of putting the puck on your backhand where generally players get pushed to their backhand. They aren't initiating the backhand handling. And so he's waiting for the defenseman to bite. And as soon as he bites, he just puts the backhand, he just puts the puck under their stick off his backhand, collects it on the other side. And when you're moving in like a curve like that at an angle with the puck on your backhand, defenders move their feet. And so it's a perfect storm where he can just like move like that. He waits for the reaction, then pushes the puck into the space, gets down the other side. And then once he gets around you, you're never recovering. You're never going to be able to outmuscle him and get that puck back. Yeah, there are so many dimensions to his game. Like he's going to be puck dominant in some games, and other games he's going to be a very strong off puck force who's finding space, creating chances for his teammates. He's always a valuable defensive piece. And other games you're going to see him be more of a transition kind of playmaker. So his game really has so many different layers, so many different ways that he can take it. Like he is one of the most exciting prospects on the planet for just the variety of what he can do.
Yeah, we hear often from everyone who covers this tournament year after year that the power play is super important for this tournament. It's a short tournament. Seems like every time Canada wins, they have like a 45% power play efficiency. Did you guys like what you saw on the power play tonight? It seemed like that top unit was very strong, even though I don't know if they scored outside of the 5-on-3s. I don't remember now. Maybe one at the end.
Yeah, I think the Olin Zellweger one at the end was a 5-on-4, but I think they've got the skill to be a dominant power play. I don't see why this team wouldn't be a good power play. And when you're getting 5-on-3s the way they did, especially the penalty trouble Czechia got into there, where they got this extended 5-on-3 where Power was able to put 2 into the net, and you're going to have a good time, especially against a team like Czechia when you have the skill and the talent that Canada has. I'm going to be more interested to see them against Finland, who's really a strong defensive unit. They play really well as a team. And then in the elimination rounds when they play Sweden or the US or Russia, not Russia, Russia's something else, but any of those other teams, like it's going to be fun to see when they go up against some higher end talent that's a little bit more structured defensively.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna move from this on to we're gonna talk about the canceled under 18 Women's World Cup in a couple moments here. I've got a couple more points from the game, but I know some people want us to talk about that, and I know three white guys, you really want us to talk about it. So we're gonna tell you what we think about it for sure, but I'm sorry if it's three white guys talking about it today. It's just the way it works out. Two things that I wanted to talk about before we get to that was the second Canada goal, where there were some people who think that it was a goaltender interference, and there was obviously some contact with the goaltender before the goal. But where do you guys stand on that? Should Czechia have challenged that, or was it a matter of Malik or Malik, I forget which was the proper pronunciation, kind of tried to sell that a little bit and got caught?
It was interesting because I think he did kind of sell it, and I think in most scenarios it probably would have been a goaltender interference thing. But because Perfetti got out of there, and because Owen Power like almost like waited for the crease to clear before he shot the puck off the goalie, it almost made it like not worth challenging. But yeah, it was a weird one for sure.
Gotta be honest, I don't remember the goal.
Didn't stand out. It was the worst goal of the game. We'll put it that way. It was the only one that wasn't really spectacular, pretty much. But basically, Perfetti got into the goal crease, knocked Malik into the net, and then got out of there. And Malik kind of like went down and held his head a little bit, and the puck came out to the point, and it got shot on the net and went over his shoulder as he was like just starting to get up. It was a good bit of time between the contact and the shot, which I think is why they didn't challenge. But for a few people that I saw, they were saying like, why was that not goaltender interference? My opinion is that he got caught selling, and they weren't going to call it goaltender interference.
Yeah, I'm watching it now, and I think that's probably the right take on this.
Yeah, and the last thing that I want to talk about at this game is how How can we not talk about it? Ivan. What kind of legend has 3 names that are the exact same? Who is this guy, and why have I not heard of him until now?
I have bad news. It's actually only Ivan or Ivan.
Okay, so there was a mistake on the broadcast?
Yeah, there was a
Okay.
mistake. So he sits with Marcel who you're going to see at the tournament next year.
No way.
With just double named players. So yeah, it's unfortunate. The world is a cruel place. You know, they can't allow us to have this, but this is the way it is.
So it's only Ivan. We're not quite at Ivan cubed, only Ivan squared.
Yeah, I think it was the depressing moment came when the Cape Breton Islanders were the ones that tweeted out breaking news. We talked to his billet mother, and it's just 2 Ivans.
Oh man, I mean, I hope that he's an amazing player because I would like to see Ivan in the NHL. I think that's fantastic. This game was like a smorgasbord of amazing names. Honestly, there's some excellent ones on Team Canada. I feel like Neighbors should be calling his line mates like neighbors.
And he's mean too. He's not a very good neighbor, man. Like you see what he did to David Jiricek early in that first period? Twice he got him.
Yep. I mean, and Gooley was out there running around. He was taking names. Like it was
a tame game for Gooley on the physicality side too. Like he was under control, man.
I do wonder with the guys like that on the blue line if Canada starts getting in some penalty trouble here, because you saw how that happened and how that turned the game in a lot of respects for Czechia. So it could happen. But okay, so before we talk about the Women's World Championship, I got to hawk the stuff. So check out the SDPN merch store. Get an amazing mug or a cool shirt. And make sure that you subscribe to the podcast everywhere you can find podcasts. And if you like the show, hit a like on the YouTube page here. It helps us. And tell all your friends about it so they come and tune in as well. So let's talk about the canceled, for now at least, under 18 Women's World Cup or Championship. Sorry. The IHF basically told everyone that it was the federations that couldn't afford it. The Swedish Federation today, or it might have been last night, said that wasn't the case and that they were completely willing to put on the tournament and are comfortable doing bubbled tournaments. And then Ontario's Women's Hockey Federation said they were willing to host it. Where's the disconnect here in your guys' opinion? Because it seems like there are solutions to have this go forward to not be canceled 2 years in a row. And if it's not a financial issue, what's the holdup? Why are we shelving 2 years of development for women's hockey?
The horrible part about all of this is that every sports league that has ever existed lost a ton of money when it first started. And the tournament that we're talking about, that we're covering right now, was not really a thing that was on the radar until TSN was sitting there with the rights and was like, okay, I mean, it's at a good time, so let's see if we can convince the Canadian people that this is part of the institution. And you could very easily do that with a women's under 18 championship or even a women's under 20 championship, which doesn't currently exist, which is phenomenally awful. Like that is indescribably terrible that there is not an under 20 women's world championship. Not just because that having an under 20 championship, players are older, a little bit more mature, a little bit more talented. It's going to be faster paced, more marketable hockey than the under 18 equivalent, but also because it provides an incredible development opportunity for a lot of these players who don't get the same exposure that their male counterparts do.
Yeah, and to piggyback on Mitch's point there, I think the fact that they're canceling the women's under 18s yet again, I think it was Julie Robbenheimer that tweeted at us after we kind of discussed it a little bit on Twitter, and she was saying that Team Canada or Hockey Canada, Hockey USA, they foot the bill for the World Under 18s last year and the World Juniors the last couple of years. And now we're seeing Sweden say that they're willing to do it. And why won't the WHIF do it? And the only reason really is it's the women's tournament and they don't want to at this point. But like Mitch said, getting that World Under 20 tournament, if that became a thing, like he said, that's another opportunity for these girls to develop. That's another opportunity for just to showcase the game, because we see we watch the World Under 18s. I know Mitch and I both watch it intimately every year. And while I think that's a big event, it's not what the World Juniors is. If TSN jumped on board and got the women's World Juniors going a month later, a couple months later, I think they could do just as good of a job of developing this. And then, like Mitch said, you get some of these girls that don't necessarily get to play on the women's under 18 team because they're not quite developed yet. By the time they're 20, maybe they've changed, maybe they've developed. We see it all the time with the men's side of the game where they're like, oh, this player never played for Canada up until the World Juniors, and now look at him, he's a key member on the team. And I think you're losing out on a lot of stories. I think you're losing out on a lot of drama, and at the end of the day, you're losing out on development for women's hockey.
Yeah,
I'm
and this
so
goes
glad you guys
deeper
brought
than-
up the under 20 because this is not a point that I've heard talked about so far. And sorry to interrupt you there, Mitch, but just to kind of, I just realized that I have the names swapped on the show. You got the wrong names under here, but anyway, to get back to the under 20
I don't
thing.
want to be Tony. Come on.
Yeah, you're
I don't
Tony
even
now,
wanna
Mitch.
be
I'm
Tony,
sorry.
So I've won here. This is a big win for me.
I'm gonna have to shave my head and everything like that. I was just starting to
Oh.
be happy with my hair, and oh god.
Yeah. That's a rough one.
Unfortunate.
It's a
It'll be
loss for
fixed for the
him.
next show, I promise. But so the under 20 thing is so interesting to me because I'm thinking back now, and the moment when Christine Sinclair, to put it in another sport, captured everyone's hearts was an under 20 women's soccer tournament, right? And the fact that like the men's under 18s like don't get near the push that the under 20s do, it makes so much more sense to create a women's under 20 hockey tournament and push that. And I mean, push the under 18s as well, but push that as like the next big thing for women's hockey, because that is absolutely wild that they don't have that.
Yeah, and this runs deeper too. Like this just is an extension of the inequality that exists for not just women in general, but also for women in sports. You see this everywhere, with pretty much every sport, is that women are afforded fewer developmental opportunities. There are fewer showcase events. They generally don't get the same level of coaching. They don't get the same level of resources put towards their development. And then it becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of, they're not talented enough to do this, or we can't have them on this channel because people aren't interested in it because they think the quality of the sport is worse, which not true. But the second part is it would be better if you were putting money into it from the very beginning. So it's very it's one of these subjects that isn't delicate at all. The solution is very obvious, but for whatever reason, we just continue to have a discussion of trying to figure out the sort of false argument that we've created.
Yeah, and I had sorry, Tony, go ahead.
I was going to say, to piggyback on Mitch's point there, and a little bit on your point going back to Christine St. Clair, I think a couple of years ago when we watched the NCAA tournament kind of bubble up and try to do their thing, we saw those pictures get released from the women's tournament where it was like, here's a couple bands and some small rack of dumbbells, whereas the men had like this entire fitness center to do their thing. And you go back to that, you go back to women's hockey tournaments, you hear stories all the time where even the women's under 18s versus the men's under 18s, the facilities are just completely different. The setup is different, where the men's system gets so much more given to them. It's because they're funded more. And it's just one of these things where it's like, yeah, you know what? Like someone needs to step up and go, you know what? I'm going to maybe lose money this first year, but that's because we've lacked so many years in a row that we haven't given them the chance to actually get to the point where they can be profitable and they can be doing this thing, because the game is fun. Like I don't know how many times I'm watching the Olympics and the women's game is the one that I'm more entertained by because the Canadian men are dominating or something like that. It's unfortunate, really.
Yeah, I had a conversation about this relatively recently. I was talking about like of the 10 best hockey games that I've watched in my life, I feel like 5 of them are women's hockey games, and I've watched 50 times more men's hockey games than women's hockey games in my life. So that should tell you a lot about how intense the high level women's hockey is. Like at the Olympics, like you mentioned, how many women's gold medal games have been better than every single men's gold medal game? Like it's just not even close. So the fact that we just sit on it, and I was talking to a friend of mine recently when this was first announced, and he was saying like, it's part of the IIHF's mandate to grow the game. They say it is. Like they put that in their public relations and everything in their press releases. But do you believe that the IIHF thinks that it has that mandate, or do they just like to control and profit from international hockey?
You're telling me that a corporation? Oh, never mind. This is the wrong podcast.
Hold on, is FIFA evil too?
I was just gonna say that. Is FIFA out to get money, or are they there to grow the game? No, it's a corporation.
It's sad, and I think they're actually currently listed as a nonprofit, which is interesting considering some people did some digging as this tournament came out, and the IHF was like, well, we don't want to step in and fund everything. They're sitting on something like close to 40 million in liquid funds, so they could step in and just fund a tournament. Like there's safety issues and uncertainty, of course, because of COVID, but that's true of this tournament as well. It's just that this one is a very clear moneymaker, right? And the short-term thinking from hockey in general, with women's hockey and in a lot of areas, but women's hockey to be specific is crazy. That like, oh well, if we're not immediately making money hand over fist right now, then it's not worth investing in. It's the same kind of stupidity that you see with the NHL oftentimes, where they don't want to invest in something because it's not an immediate money maker. When like 10 years down the line, it might be their biggest.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that, like I said, it's going to take someone stepping up and going, I don't care what happens here. My goal isn't to make money off this tournament. My goal is to grow the game, and truly mean that, because at this point, we don't have anyone that's willing to step up and do that outside of the players who are trying to run the PWHA or run the PHF, kind of getting that going. And everyone's kind of trying to do their own thing, but no one has the support behind it of an NHL or a real power backer.
Yeah, it is incredibly unfortunate. We're trying to keep these shows a little bit shorter than the Game Over Montreal feeds, so we're probably gonna wrap it up shortly here. But did you guys have any closing thoughts on the game or on the IIHF and this whole controversy before we close up shop here?
I got nothing. Canada looked like Canada always does to start a tournament, and yeah, they're gonna probably medal. They always do. They're gonna be a really competitive team. They got to figure out their defensive issues. They got to figure out what they're gonna do when they face a little bit more of a high-powered opponent. But unfortunately, they really only have Sweden to kind of push that, because their group isn't the strongest, and it's gonna be like the last couple years, I think, where we go, okay, now that we're going into the elimination games, what's going to happen? Because now they're going to face a Sweden or a Russia, who, despite the fact that they don't have any defensemen worth talking about, really, they have some offensive pieces that can kind of push the pace. I mean, we watched Michkov score 2 goals basically accidentally today. So it's going to be fun to see what some of these high-powered offenses do against Canada, because, like I said, their defensive issues are a little hit and miss right now.
My final thoughts are Logan Stankoven needs a game, please. Can we please
Yes.
have this? And Connor Bedard needs more ice time. Connor Bedard had some fantastic shifts in this game. And then later on, he's like, if I start hitting people, maybe I'll get to play more. And then he just started hitting people.
Oh man, he's looking at Will Cooley getting all that ice time and going, do I hit a guy 5 seconds after he passes and be completely inconsequential, or what do I do?
That's the way to get ice time in Canada. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I do want to push back on one of the commenters here before we close it up. Everyone's saying, he's saying everyone talks a good game with women's hockey, but nobody's going out there willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a ticket for their games or making donations. Lots of people are, actually. There is a lot of grassroots movements. There you go. Tony wearing a PHWA PA sweater right now. Lots of people are. So that's total BS. And also, I've watched every World Juniors since I was like young enough to the point where I don't remember it. I've only gone to like 3 World Juniors games in my life, and one of them was just because I got tickets super cheap for the gold medal game when they were here in Montreal, because they weren't selling out, right? So that's bull. Most of the times that, like, when they came to Montreal the first time, I didn't go because they were asking like $400 a ticket, and I wasn't going to pay that for a junior game. So that's just BS. That's like saying that you aren't watching the juniors. You don't care about the World Juniors if you're not watching junior hockey every day. Just because somebody isn't able to or has time to buy tickets doesn't necessarily mean they aren't supporting. The fact is, they need to put the damn stuff on TV, and they need to promote it, because that is how they make money eventually. You fill those arenas, you fill full arenas by getting people to know that the product is out there. Someone with the power to actually invest at the macro level, not the micro level like individuals, has to put the money in and get these women on TV regularly, push the tournaments as important as must-see TV like we did with the World Juniors through TSN, and it will happen. It's the way things work in this sport. I mean, you get Canadians riled up about hockey, they're going to watch. Whether it's in the arena or at home on their TV, the women will start making money. I have no time for people saying like, oh, well, you need to personally fund a women's league. No, I'm a sports reporter. I don't make millions of dollars a year. People who make millions of dollars a year and the actual like major corporations, they're who needs to fund it. Yes, you want to support it. And yes, you want to support them at every opportunity that you possibly can afford. But putting that moral obligation on the average hockey fan is stupid. So I'm sorry that you can't understand that disconnect there, but we're going to end it on this. Support women's hockey however you can or however you want to. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. But to say that it's not worth supporting or that people don't support it for real because they're not buying tickets to an event they might not even know about is dumb. All right. So we'll see you again in a couple of days here back on Game Over Juniors. It was a great conversation here with Mitch and Tony before we close out. First, Mitch, and then Tony, tell us where to find your stuff.
Go on eprinkside.com. We got all great World Juniors coverage on pretty much every player at this point. I'm gasping my last breaths after writing these last 2 months to prepare for it. And then head to our YouTube page after this is over. And then go watch my video on Caden Gooley. Go watch David St. Louis' video on Matvey Mishkov or my one on Connor Bedard. And, you know, maybe stick around, especially if you're a Leafs fan. There might be something fun coming for you in a few weeks.
And as for me, you can find all my work at the Hockey News. I'm doing tons of daily stuff for the World Juniors. We've got a ton of content out already as well. And as Mitch is plugging YouTube, I guess I might as well as myself. I've got some game tape videos, including one with Brad Lambert, who had a pretty sweet day today at the World Juniors. So check those out. I go over some game tape with the player themselves in an interview format and kind of get their take on their own game. So it's kind of fun.
All right. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on here with me tonight. And thanks everyone for watching, except for the person who was trying to crap on women's hockey. Because we all love women's hockey here, and we love the World Juniors, and we can't wait to be back with you against Germany next? Yeah, Germany next? Or Austria?
Someone they're going to get beat up.
One of the two. Canada's going to win. That's what's going to happen. You know,
Finland
is the first real challenge.
Yeah. I would say Andrew's getting so confident after one win of being used to Montreal losses.
I watched so many losses this year, like one comeback win. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Nikita Quab, 55 save shutout incoming. Just you wait.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? People will not shut up about this show being cursed. But anyway,